Welcome back, this is Wargamer Sean. I'm here to bring you the 8th edition Necron Codex. We're on part 4, and we are discussing the elite section in this video. Hopefully, if you have watched the other videos, if you haven't, I would recommend potentially starting from the first 8th edition Necron video to kind of catch the special rules before you kind of go on to the general troops. So today we're going to do the elites. There's a decent amount of them. We're going to start with the Lich Guard. They are 5-inch movement. They are weapon skillables skill 3, strength 5, toughness 5, 2 wounds, and 2 attacks, leadership 10, and a 3-up save. This unit has 5 Lich Guard. You can have up to 5 more. They're armed with war scythes, and then they can trade them in for hyperface, swords, and dispersion fields, but the whole team has to do it, the whole group. So the hyperface sword is strength +1, so it'd be strength 6, -3 AP and 1 damage. And then the war scythes are +2 strength, -4 AP, which is big, and 2 damage. The dispersion shield gives them a 4-up invuln. Now that's a change. It used to be a 3-up, just like a storm shield, and it's now a 4-up invulnerable save. So that's a little bit of a hit. And unfortunately, most of my Lich Guard I've built with the hyperface sword and the dispersion shields, and I'm gonna have to build some or change some to the war scythes, because the war scythes are actually pretty good, and the invuln saves aren't as good as they were, but still, looking back at it, having a 4-up invuln, basically anything more than -1 AP, the shields are still going to benefit the model. They have Guardian protocols, so you roll a d6 each time a friendly dynasty character loses a wound while they're within 3 inches of this unit. On a 2-up, the model from this unit can intercept the hit. The character does not lose a wound, but this unit suffers a mortal wound instead. So their good is kind of eating the shots of characters. Although a lot of times, depending on how big the character is, as long as it's under 8 wounds, they can't be shot at or targeted anyway, except for sniper rifles. So it's not as big a deal as it may could have been. The next elite are the Death Marks. They have 5-man unit, and they can have 5 more. Their movement is 5 inches. Weapon skill skill 3, strength toughness 4, 1 wound, 1 attack, leadership 10, 3+ save. They have synaptic disintegrators. They're 24-inch range, rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. This weapon may target a character even if it is not the closest unit. Each time you roll a wound of 6 for this weapon, the target suffers a mortal wound in addition to any other damage. So if you roll a 6 on the wound, it's doing a mortal wound plus, if they don't save, an additional wound. These guys aren't the big and scary guys like they were back in 5th and 6th, and they're not quite the same. The hunters from hyperspace, during deployment you can set them in hyperspace oubliette instead of placing on the battlefield. At the end of any of your movement phases, Death Marks can slip back into reality, set them up anywhere on the battlefield that's 9 inches away from enemy units. Or they can do ethereal interception, which is when an enemy model is set up other than during deployment or when it's disembarking. You can immediately set up a unit of Death Marks that is set up. It was set up in hyperspace oubliette, and then put them on the battlefield anywhere more than 9 inches away from enemy models and within 12 inches of the enemy unit that just been set up. So that can be a little tricky. You can then make a shooting attack with this unit as if it were the shooting phase, but the attack must target the unit that was just set up. So basically, you kind of have to watch when your opponent is setting up their units, because you have to do this immediately after they set up the unit. And then it could actually help you if you're trying to get a unit so that it's within 12 inches of that unit they set down and more than 9 inches away from the enemy unit. Because let's say they set down a character and it's just an individual, and they set it up first before they set up the squad that might be closer or surrounding it. That might give you your chance to bring them in close enough and also block the enemy, your opponent, from bringing down another unit close to that character because they have to be 9 inches away from you. So there's some ways you can kind of play that and help. And I think that makes the death marks a little useful. I don't think they're super great unit just because they are elite. They're not troops. And I think they're going to basically do something and then basically kind of be one and done. They might shoot something, maybe they'll kill something, an important character, and then they're going to get blasted by everything else. And so you're probably not going to have much, be able to use them very much. But we'll see. I mean, time will tell. The next elite are the Flayed ones, and they are 5-inch movement, 3 weapon skill, ballistic skill 6, strength toughness 4, 1 wound, 3 attacks, leadership 10, 4+ save. So they contain 5 Flayed ones and can include up to 5 additional ones, or up to 10 additional ones, or up to 15. So they can actually have a unit of 20. My apologies. And they all have flare claws. The flare claws, I was hoping for a little bit of a minus AP. Unfortunately, they don't have it. They're the strength of the user, so strength 4. They're 0 AP. They do 1 damage, but you can re-roll failed to wound rolls for this weapon. So almost like having power claws, except no AP. They have reanimation protocols. They have flesh hunger. So if a Flayed one slays an enemy unit, any model in a unit, that unit subtracts 1 from their leadership until the end of their turn. So it's good to remember because that actually can make a difference to help with leadership tests. They have haunting horrors. During deployment, you can set this unit up in a charnel pocket dimension instead of placing it on the battlefield. At the end of any of your movement phases, the Flayed ones can crawl out of reality and set them anywhere up on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So that's cool. I was kind of hoping that they would have something maybe, or even a stratagem that allowed them to re-roll their charge ranges to kind of help them get into combat because that's what they want. And I think they're potentially kind of, with only a 5-inch movement phase, they're kind of sitting ducks. Or if they had the ability to assault move and still charge, although there is a stratagem for that. I think these guys also, they're cool. I like the models, but they're going to be kind of tricky to use, I think, unfortunately. The next unit of elites is the Triarch Praetorians. These guys used to be kind of jump units. They have a movement of 10 now. Weapon skill 3, strength 5, toughness 5, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 10, and a 3-up save. They have 5 Praetorians per unit. You can have up to 5 additional ones. Each model is armed with the Rod of the Covenant. Now, the Rod of the Covenant has a 12-inch shooting assault 1, strength 5, minus 3 AP, 1 damage. And in melee, it's the strength of the user, minus 3 AP and 1 damage. So that's pretty good. And the Rod of the Covenant was good in the last edition, too. The entire unit may replace the Rods of the Covenant with Void Blades and Particle Casters. Now, this is a different option, and now this time it's actually a little bit more worth considering than the last edition. The Particle Caster is a 12-inch pistol, so you can shoot that in close combat, which is good, because these guys probably want to be in close combat. The pistol is strength 6, but there's no AP and 1 damage, so no AP is a little harsh. The Void Blade, though, is a melee weapon. It's strength of the user, minus 3 AP, 1 damage, so the same as the Rod of the Covenant, but each time the bearer fights, it gets to make 1 additional attack with this weapon. So they have 3 attacks versus 2. So I'm really considering building a squad of these guys with the pistol and Void Blade because I think they kind of have their place. And getting 1 more attack is good too. I don't think the Particle Caster is that great. The Rod of the Covenant, I think, is clearly better shooting-wise with the AP. But the Void Blade, anytime you can get extra attacks, it's kind of hard to generate those now. Because of the way, if you have 2 close combat weapons, you don't get an extra attack like you used to in the previous edition. So it's nice to have that. And it's the same AP and damage as the Rod of the Covenant. So it makes the Void Blade definitely, something to consider. The other thing that's cool, they have reanimation protocol, which is typical, but they have unshakable, purpose unshakable, so they automatically automatically pass morale tests. They don't have to take morale tests at all. So that's really good. They are Necrons, but they do not belong to a dynasty, so this is one of those that you can take and it won't screw up your dynasty, but just remember, they don't benefit from your dynasty special rules too. So, they do have fly, and so that does help if they want to back out of combat and shoot. The Triarch Stalker is next. This one is Strength 7, Toughness 6, 10 wounds, 3 attacks, Leadership 10, 3 up save. 6 to 10 wounds, it moves 10 inches, and it has a weapon skillable skill 3. 3 to 5 wounds, it's got 8-inch movement, 4 of weapon skillable skill, and then 1 to 2 wounds is 6-inch movement, and 5 blood skill, weapon skill. This model is equipped with a heat, ray, and massive forelimbs. The massive forelimbs are the strength of the user, so strength 7, -1 AP, and D3 wounds, so that's decent. It's good in close combat, or decent in close combat, I should say. And then the heat ray, you can fire it dispersed, which is 8 inches, heavy 2d6, and strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage, and it automatically hits, so it's like a flamer. If you fire it focused, it's 24 inch, heavy 2, strength 8, and then AP -4, so like a melta, d6 damage, and if you're within half range, you get to roll 2 dice when inflicting damage and discard the lowest, so just like a melta. And then the particle shredder you can equip it with instead is heavy 6, 24-inch range, strength 7, -1 AP, D3 wounds, or twin heavy gauze cannon, which is 36 inches, heavy 2, strength 9, AP -4, D6 wounds. That's pretty good. Now, this it has living metal and quantum shielding, which is good. When it gets to 0 wounds on a roll of a 6, those within 6 inches suffer D3 mortal wounds. And then it has a targeting relay, so hit rolls of 1 for any friendly Necrons in the shooting phase. For any friendly Necron units that make a shooting attack against a unit that has already been attacked by the Triarch Stalker in this phase. So if you really want to kind of add help, shoot with the Stalker first, and then you can reroll hit rolls of 1 for any Necron unit that's shooting at the same target. So it's not quite the same as it used to be, not quite as good either. So I'm not as big a fan of the Triarch Stalker, and the fact that everything's heavy and it's -1 hit, so it's hitting on 4s because it's only below skill 3 if it's moving. Otherwise, if it sits still, it can shoot. But remember, except for the twin heavy gauze cannon, which used to be strength 10 in the last edition, it's now strength 9, and -4 AP is good, but the rest of them are only 24-inch range, so it's kind of got to be moving to get its targets. Now, if it gets within 8 inches, it can use the flamer and not worry about dispersed heat ray because it's automatically hitting. But I'm not as big a fan on this guy as I was in the last edition. Now, the next two are Satan Shards of the Deceiver and the Nightbringer. The other Satan is a heavy choice. Now, the Deceiver is movement 8 inches, weapon skillable skill 2, strength 7, toughness 7, wounds 8, attacks 4, leadership 10, 4+ save. It is a Satan Shard. Also doesn't get the Dynasty traits. It can never have a Warlord trait. So don't make him your Warlord. And then Reality Unravels. If the Satan Shard of the Deceiver is reduced to 0 wounds, roll a d6. On a 4-up, its Necrodermis tears a hole in reality, and each unit within 3 inches suffers d3 mortal wounds. So be careful when this thing dies. Powers of Satan. The Satan Shard of the Deceiver can take 2 powers of the Satan and use 1 of its powers in each turn at the end of each of its movement phases. The Satan Shard has a 4+ invulnerable save, and your opponent must add 1 to morale tests for any enemy units within 12 inches of the Satan Shard of the Deceiver. So when you're taking morale tests, you have to add 1 to your roll. Grand Illusion at the beginning of the first battle round, but before the first round begins, you can remove the Satan Shard of the Deceiver and or up to D3 other friendly Necron units from the battlefield, and then set them up Again, more than 12 inches away from enemy models. If you do so, these units cannot charge the first turn. So it's really cool because you get to move them, you can get them close, but then they can't charge. So I don't really know how useful that is unless you just want to trick your opponent and go, okay, well, here's where you played your stuff or your units, and now I want to rearrange stuff to better hit your units. I could see it being helpful for that, but I don't see it being helpful to get close because you're just going to eat shots and you can't assault. The Citta shard of the Nightbringer. So the stats are the same as the Deceiver, except that he has the Gaze of Death and the Scythe of the Nightbringer. And he has Gaze of Death, which is 12-inch range, Assault D6, Strength star, and then -4 AP, Damage D3. This weapon wounds on a 2-up regardless of the unit's toughness, unless it's a vehicle unit, in which case it wounds on a 6+. So if you don't shoot it at a vehicle, basically. The Scythe of the Nightbringer is melee. It's -4 AP, D6 wounds, but this weapon wounds on a 2-up unless it's a vehicle, in which case the strength is 7, which is still pretty dang good. So he's ripping through stuff. He has a 4-up invuln. He knows 2 powers of the Citta and can use 1 at the end of each of its movement phase. And then Reality unravels. If it reduces 0 wounds on a 4-up, it basically blows up. And then this model can never have a Warlord trait, so just like the other Citta shard. And it does fly, just like the other one, and it is a monster. The fly, I guess, helps if you want to back out and shoot, although most of the time I think you honestly just want to be in combat with this guy because he's wrecking stuff. He's got 4 attacks, and he's wounding on... He's hitting on 2s, and he's wounding on 2s unless it's a vehicle, so he's pretty tough. So that is the elite section for the Necrons. Tune in for the next part, part 5, and we'll go through the fast attack section of the 8th edition Necron Codex. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. You guys take care and keep on wargaming.
Goodbye, you sexy motherfucker.